Karen's bony finger stabbed the air as she glared at the offending refuse on Sarah's porch. This is an outrage. I demand you remove this trash immediately. Sarah gripped the doorframe, heart pounding. She'd only moved in last week. How could she already be in trouble with the neighborhood busybody? I'm sorry, I don't understand, she stammered. What trash? That, Karen shrieked, her thin lips pulled back in a snarl. She gestured wildly at the small stack of cardboard boxes near the front door. This is unacceptable. Your unsightly garbage is ruining the aesthetic of our beautiful community. Sarah's brow furrowed as she glanced at the innocuous boxes. Those are just some unpacked moving boxes. I was going to take them to the recycling center later today. Absolutely not, Karen snapped. You will remove them at once. I won't tolerate this kind of eyesore on my street. She took a menacing step forward, her expression darkening. And let this be a warning. I'm the head of the HOA, and I will not hesitate to levy fines if you continue to disregard our standards. Sarah's mouth went dry. The HOA. Fines. This was her first real home, bought with years of hard-earned savings. She couldn't afford any penalties. Panic rose in her chest as she scrambled for a diplomatic response. Please, I'm still getting settled. I'll have the boxes cleared away by tomorrow, I promise. Is there anything else I can do to? But Karen wasn't listening. With a huff, she spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering under her breath about inconsiderate millennials and declining property values. Sarah watched her go, feeling small and powerless. She'd heard stories about HOA tyrants, but she never imagined dealing with one firsthand. Closing the door, she leaned against it, heart pounding. What was she going to do? The next morning, Sarah rose early to tackle the boxes. As she dragged the last one to her car, a voice called out from next door. Excuse me, miss? May I have a word? Sarah froze, dread pooling in her stomach. Had Karen already reported her? Bracing herself, she turned to see a distinguished-looking older man approaching, hands clasped behind his back. I'm terribly sorry to bother you, he said, his tone polite but serious. I couldn't help but overhear your interaction with Mrs. Simmons yesterday. I wanted to make sure there wasn't any misunderstanding. Sarah's mouth went dry. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. The man offered a slight smile. Please, call me Mayor Hadley. I'm your neighbor, you see. I live right next door. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. The mayor? Living right next door to the neighborhood terror? Oh God, she breathed, imagining the fallout. I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Please, let me explain. Mayor Hadley raised a hand. With Mayor Hadley's assistance, Sarah quickly had the last of the boxes loaded into her car. As she closed the trunk, she turned to him with a grateful smile. Thank you so much for your help, and for, well, everything. I have to admit, I was a little worried after my run-in with Mrs. Simmons yesterday. The mayor nodded sympathetically. Yes, I can imagine. Karen can be quite a force to be reckoned with. But I assure you, she does not speak for the entire community. He placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. You are a welcome addition to our neighborhood, my dear. And you have an ally in me, should you ever need one. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. That's so kind of you to say. I really appreciate it. Not at all, Mayor Hadley replied. Now, I don't mean to pry, but I couldn't help but notice that you seem to be handling this move all on your own. Do you have any family or friends nearby who could lend a hand? Sarah shook her head ruefully. No, I'm afraid not. I just moved here from the city for a new job. This is my first place of my own. She chuckled self-consciously. I'm still getting used to the idea of being a real adult, as my friends like to say. The mayor smiled warmly. Well, in that case, allow me to make you an offer. Why don't you join me and my wife for dinner this evening? It would be our pleasure to welcome you to the neighborhood properly. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Oh, I couldn't possibly impose. Nonsense. The mayor interrupted gently. That evening, Sarah found herself seated at the Hadleys' elegantly appointed dining table, marveling at the delectable spread before her. Mayor Hadley's wife, Mildred, was indeed a talented cook, and Sarah savored every bite of the homemade meal. "This is absolutely delicious, Mrs. Hadley," she said, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin. "I can't thank you enough for inviting me into your home." Mildred waved a hand dismissively, her warm smile putting Sarah at ease. "Nonsense, dear. It's our pleasure. We so rarely get to entertain these days, what with Harold's busy schedule." She cast an adoring glance at her husband. The mayor chuckled. "Yes, well, the demands of public office can be quite relentless. But I always make time for the important things in life." He reached across the table to gently squeeze his wife's hand. Sarah felt a pang of wistfulness watching their affectionate exchange. Her own parents had passed away years ago, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd witnessed such a tender display of marital devotion. Sensing her pensive mood, Mildred leaned forward, her brow creased with concern. "You know, dear, we were so terribly sorry to hear about your parents. Harold told me a bit about your situation. Moving here all on your own, without any family nearby." Sarah felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Oh, it's all right, really. I'm managing just fine. I don't mean to impose." "Nonsense," Mildred interjected firmly. "You're not imposing at all. In fact, we consider it a privilege to welcome you into our home." She reached across the table to give Sarah's hand a gentle squeeze. "Please, don't ever hesitate to come to us if you need anything. A home-cooked meal, a listening ear, even just a friendly face. We may be your neighbors, but we hope to be so much more than that." Sarah felt her eyes sting with tears, overwhelmed by the Hadleys' unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. That means more to me than you know." Mayor Hadley nodded solemnly. "Of course, my dear. Your family now." He raised his glass, prompting Sarah and Mildred to do the same. To new beginnings and the joy of finding a place to call home. As they clinked their glasses, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the turn her day had taken. From the confrontation with Karen to this warm, welcoming embrace, it was almost too much to process. But in that moment, surrounded by the Hadleys' kindness and hospitality, Sarah felt a sense of peace and belonging that she hadn't experienced in a long time. Perhaps moving to this neighborhood wouldn't be so daunting after all. Little did she know, however, that the true test of her resilience was only just beginning. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Sarah as she settled into her new home. With the Hadleys' steadfast support, she was able to navigate the challenges of her move with far less stress than she'd anticipated. Mayor Hadley kept a watchful eye on the situation with Karen, gently but firmly discouraging any further harassment. To Sarah's relief, the HOA president seemed to back off, at least temporarily, though she still caught the occasional disapproving glare whenever their paths crossed. One evening, as Sarah was tending to her small garden, a familiar figure approached from next door. She tensed, expecting another confrontation, but was pleasantly surprised when Mildred Hadley offered her a warm smile. "Good evening, dear," the older woman said, clasping her hands together. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Sarah replied, relaxing her stance. "Please come join me. I was just admiring the new blooms." Mildred stepped closer, peering intently at the vibrant flowers. "They're absolutely lovely. You have quite the green thumb, don't you?" Sarah chuckled. "I try my best, but I'm still learning. Gardening is new territory for me." "Well, you're doing a marvelous job," Mildred assured her. "And I must say, it's so wonderful to see the porch looking lively again. That dreadful pile of boxes was such an eyesore." Sarah winced, suddenly recalling her confrontation with Karen. "Yes, about that. I really can't thank you and the mayor enough for your support. I was so worried I was going to get into trouble with the HOA. Mildred waved a hand dismissively. Nonsense, dear. Harold and I will always have your back. That woman needs to learn to mind her own business. Her brow furrowed in a rare display of frustration. The nerve of her, trying to bully a newcomer like that. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward her kind-hearted neighbors. I don't know what I would have done without you. Honestly, I was starting to have second thoughts about moving here. Heavens, no, Mildred exclaimed. You belong here, Sarah. This is your home now. She reached out to give Sarah's arm an affectionate squeeze. We're so very glad you decided to stay. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, overwhelmed by the sincerity of Mildred's words. So am I, she replied, blinking back happy tears. Thank you, Mildred, for everything. The older woman smiled warmly. Of course, my dear. Now, how about we plan a little garden party? I'd love to introduce you to some of the other neighbors. It's high time you started making friends in this community. As Mildred chattered excitedly about the event, Sarah couldn't help but feel a profound sense of relief and belonging. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found the place she was meant to be. Little did she know, however, that the true test of her resilience was only just beginning. The garden party Mildred had planned was in full swing, and Sarah couldn't believe how quickly the Hadleys had assembled a diverse group of friendly neighbors. As she chatted animatedly with a young couple from down the street, she caught sight of a familiar figure lingering at the edge of the crowd. Karen Simmons stood stiffly, her thin lips pressed into a tight line as she surveyed the gathering with thinly veiled disdain. Sarah felt a twinge of unease, bracing herself for another confrontation. Excusing herself from the conversation, she cautiously approached the HOA president. Mrs. Simmons, hello. I'm so glad you could join us. Karen's eyes narrowed as she turned to face Sarah. Emph. Yes, well, Mildred can be quite persistent. Sarah nodded, choosing her words carefully. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure the Hadleys would agree. Yes, well. Karen's gaze swept dismissively over the gathering. I must say, this is a rather eclectic group you've assembled. Sarah felt her hackles rise, but she forced herself to remain calm. I think it's a wonderful representation of our diverse community. Don't you agree? Karen sniffed disdainfully. Diversity? Emph. I suppose that's one way to put it. She leveled Sarah with a pointed stare. Though I hardly consider that a virtue these days. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, her heart racing. Was Karen actually implying what she thought she was? I'm not sure I understand, she stammered, struggling to maintain her composure. But Karen simply waved a bony hand. Never mind. I'm sure you'll learn soon enough. With that, she turned and stalked away, disappearing into the crowd. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, her mind reeling. What on earth had just happened? Had Karen really just made some sort of veiled, bigoted remark? She felt a hand on her shoulder and spun around to find Mayor Hadley regarding her with a concerned expression. My dear, are you all right? He asked, his brow furrowed. I saw you speaking with Mrs. Simmons, and I couldn't help but notice you seemed distressed. Sarah hesitated, unsure of how to broach the subject. I'm not entirely sure, Mayor Hadley. She said something that I found, well, rather troubling. The mayor's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. I see. Please, tell me what happened. As Sarah recounted the exchange, she watched the mayor's expression darken with each word. By the time she finished, his face was a mask of barely contained anger. Unacceptable, he growled, his voice low and intense. I will not tolerate such blatant bigotry in my community. Rest assured, I will be having a very stern conversation with Mrs. Simmons. Sarah felt a surge of relief, but also a twinge of trepidation. I appreciate that, Mayor Hadley, truly. But I don't want to cause any trouble. He held up a hand, silencing her. Nonsense. You have done nothing wrong, Sarah. It is my responsibility as the leader of this community to ensure that everyone feels welcomed and respected. His gaze softened, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You are part of our family now, and I will do whatever it takes to protect you from harm. As the mayor strode off in search of Karen, Sarah felt a mix of gratitude and unease. She had no doubt that the mayor would make good on his promise, but she couldn't help but worry about the potential fallout. Little did she know, however, that the true test of her resilience was only just beginning. The confrontation between Mayor Hadley and Karen Simmons was the talk of the neighborhood for days. According to Mildred, the mayor had given the HOA president a scathing dressing down, making it clear that any further displays of bigotry or harassment would not be tolerated. He was absolutely furious. Mildred had confided to Sarah over tea. I've never seen him so worked up. Of course, Karen tried to argue and make excuses, but the mayor wouldn't have any of it. Sarah had listened with a mix of gratitude and trepidation. While she was relieved to have the mayor's unwavering support, she couldn't help but worry about the potential consequences. I just don't want to cause any trouble, she had admitted. I know how important the HOA is in a community like this. I don't want to rock the boat. Mildred had reached across the table to give Sarah's hand a gentle squeeze. My dear, you've done nothing wrong. It's that dreadful woman who should be worried about the consequences of her actions. The older woman's expression had turned serious. I want you to know that you have our full backing, Sarah. Harold and I will not stand idly by and let Karen or anyone else mistreat you. You're family now, and we protect our own. Sarah had felt a rush of emotion, her eyes stinging with tears. Thank you, Mildred. I don't know what I'd do without you and the mayor. Now, as she tended to her garden, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the events of the past few weeks. She had gone from feeling isolated and vulnerable to being embraced by a supportive community. The Hadleys, in particular, had become a true lifeline. But still, a nagging sense of unease lingered in the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was plotting something, that the woman's bigoted outburst at the garden party was only the tip of the iceberg. As if summoned by Sarah's thoughts, a shadow fell across the flowers, and she looked up to see the very subject of her concerns standing at the edge of her property. Mrs. Simmons, Sarah greeted her, her voice hesitant. Can I help you with something? Karen's thin lips curled into a humorless smile. Oh, I'm sure you can, my dear. In fact, I've come to discuss a rather pressing matter with you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she forced herself to remain calm. What is it? Well, you see, Karen began, her tone dripping with false sweetness, it has come to my attention that you've been neglecting your property maintenance duties. Sarah blinked in confusion. I'm sorry. I don't understand. What do you mean? Why, the weeds in your garden, of course, Karen said, her eyes narrowing. It's an absolute eyesore, my dear. And as the head of the HOA, I simply cannot allow such blatant disregard for our community standards. Sarah's mouth went dry as realization dawned. This was Karen's retaliation, her way of striking back at the mayor's intervention. But I've been maintaining the garden regularly, she protested weakly, her mind racing. I've even been praised for how lovely it looks. Karen's smile widened, and Sarah felt a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. Oh, I'm sure you have, my dear. But you see, the HOA has very specific guidelines, and I'm afraid your garden simply doesn't meet them. She tusked dramatically. I'm afraid I'll have to issue you a formal warning, and if the issue isn't resolved within the next week, well, let's just say the consequences could be quite severe. With that, she turned and strode away, leaving Sarah rooted to the spot, her heart pounding. Little did she know, however, that the true test of her resilience was only just beginning. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the formal warning letter from the HOA, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. After all the support and kindness the Hadleys had shown her, how could Karen be so callously turning on her? Swallowing hard, she hurried next door, clutching the document as she knocked frantically on the Hadleys' door. Mildred answered, her brow furrowing with concern at Sarah's distressed expression. "My dear, what on earth is the matter?" the older woman asked, ushering Sarah inside. Sarah thrust the letter towards her, her voice shaking. It's Karen. She's issued me a formal warning from the HOA. She claims I'm neglecting my garden, and if I don't fix it within a week, there will be severe consequences." Mildred's eyes widened as she scanned the document, her lips thinning into a tight line. "The nerve of that woman!" she exclaimed, crumpling the letter in her hand. "This is clearly retribution for what happened at the garden party." Sarah nodded miserably. "I know. And I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Mildred cut her off with a firm shake of her head. "Nonsense, Sarah. This is not your fault. Karen is the one who's out of line here." Just then, Mayor Hadley emerged from his study, his expression darkening as Mildred quickly filled him in on the situation. Sarah watched apprehensively as the mayor's face grew rigid with barely contained fury. "This is unacceptable," he growled, his hands clenching into fists. "I will not allow Karen to abuse her position in this manner." He fixed Sarah with a resolute gaze. "Don't worry, my dear. I'll handle this." Before Sarah could protest, the mayor swept past them, his strides purposeful as he marched towards Karen's house. Mildred placed a comforting arm around Sarah's shoulders, her own expression grim. There, dear," she soothed. "Harold will sort this out. You mark my words." Sarah nodded, but the knot of anxiety in her stomach refused to loosen. She couldn't help but worry that this latest confrontation would only make matters worse. As the minutes ticked by, the sound of raised voices drifted from the Simmons residence, and Sarah cringed. She hated being the cause of such discord, even if it wasn't her fault. Finally, the mayor returned, his face flushed with anger. "That woman is utterly insufferable," he growled, glaring in the direction of Karen's house. "She's refused to rescind the warning, and she's threatened to call the police if I try to interfere further." Sarah felt her heart sink. "Oh no. What am I going to do?" Mildred squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "Don't you worry, dear. We're not giving up that easily." She turned to her husband, her expression resolute. "Harold, you have to do something. We can't let Karen get away with this." The mayor's brow furrowed as he considered their options. "I'll have to call an emergency meeting of the HOA board," he said slowly. "If I can't reason with Karen directly, perhaps the other members will see reason." Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. "Do you really think that will work?" "It has to," Mildred declared firmly. "We can't let that woman's bigotry and abuse of power stand. Not in our community." Mayor Hadley nodded, his expression grim. "You have my word, Sarah. We'll get this sorted out, one way or another." As the Hadleys hurried to arrange the emergency meeting, Sarah felt a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. She knew they were fighting in her corner, but a part of her couldn't shake the nagging fear that Karen's retaliation was far from over. Little did she know, however, that the true test of her resilience was only just beginning. The emergency HOA meeting was a tense and volatile affair, with Mayor Hadley and Karen Simmons locked in a heated battle of wills. Sarah sat anxiously in the back of the room, her stomach in knots as she watched the drama unfold. "This is an outrage," Karen screeched, slamming her fist on the table. "I will not stand for this blatant disregard of our community standards." The mayor met her fury with a calm, unwavering gaze. "The only outrage here, Mrs. Simmons, is your abuse of power and your blatant discrimination against one of our residents." He turned to the other HOA board members, his voice steady and authoritative. "This warning letter is nothing more than retaliation against Miss Flores for my intervention in your previous harassment of her. It has nothing to do with the state of her property." Karen's face flushed with rage, but the mayor pressed on. I will not allow this kind of bigoted behavior to continue in our community. Miss Flores has done nothing wrong, and I demand that you rescind this warning immediately. The room erupted in a cacophony of murmurs and protests, with several board members voicing their support for Karen. Sarah felt her heart sink, fearing that the mayor's efforts would be in vain. But then, to her surprise, one of the younger members, a woman named Jen, spoke up. I have to agree with the mayor, she said firmly. This isn't about the garden at all, is it, Karen? It's about your personal vendetta. Karen whirled on her, eyes narrowed. How dare you? No, Jen interrupted, her voice cutting through the din. I've seen the way you've been treating Sarah, and I won't stand for it. This kind of behavior is unacceptable, and it has no place in our community. One by one, other board members began to voice their agreement, their expressions resolute. Sarah watched in awe as the tide began to turn against Karen, the woman's usual bluster and bluster finally meeting its match. In the end, the HOA voted overwhelmingly to rescind the warning, much to Karen's outraged protests. As the meeting adjourned, Mayor Hadley approached Sarah, a triumphant smile on his face. There, my dear, he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I told you we would get this sorted out. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, her eyes stinging with tears. I can't thank you enough, Mayor Hadley, and all of you, she added, nodding gratefully to the other board members. Jen stepped forward, offering Sarah a warm smile. Don't mention it. We're all in this together, right? And we won't let the Karens of the world divide us. As the group dispersed, Sarah found herself surrounded by a circle of supportive neighbors, all of them offering words of encouragement and solidarity. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of belonging, a realization that she had truly found her place in this community. And as she glanced back at the Hadleys, who stood watching with matching expressions of pride and affection, Sarah knew that she had gained so much more than just a new home. She had found a family. The true test of her resilience had been met, and she had emerged stronger for it.